everybody, I'm Raven Maureen, and today we're going to be doing my sew along for my first Know Me pattern, ME2104, and we're going to be making views B and C in this video. So that is going to be the pants and the cummerbund belt. So go ahead, grab your fabric, grab your tools, and let's get started. Here's what you're going to need for view B. Pattern piece number 16, this is your pocket. You're going to cut 4. Pattern piece number 13, this is your right fly facing. You're going to cut 1 of fabric, 1 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 12, this is your left fly. You're going to cut 1 of fabric, 1 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 15, this is your faux welt. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 17, this is your carrier. You're going to cut 1. Pattern piece number 18, this is your waistband. You're going to cut 1 of fabric, 1 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 11, this is your front pant leg. You're going to cut 2. And pattern piece number 14, you're going to cut 2. And here's what you're going to need for view C, which is the cummerbund. You're going to need a cummerbund buckle set. I'll put that link to where you can buy it down below. This is the Dritz set. You can buy this at Joann's, Wawak, and even Amazon. You're going to need pattern piece number 22. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of interfacing. Pattern piece 21, you're going to cut 4 of the back. Pattern piece number 20, you're going to cut 1 on the fold of fabric and 1 of interfacing. And pattern piece 19, which is the front, and you're going to cut 1. So we're going to start with pattern piece number 11. Go ahead and serge the seat of the pants right there. And then you are going to stitch from the notch to the dot. And so go ahead and put a pin right there. And then we'll put a pin right where that dot is. And we're going to do a 5/8 seam at our sewing machine between those 2 pins. All right, so wrong side facing you, you are going to move this pant leg out of the way, and you're only going to focus on the left pant leg. And you see this dot right here, this is an indication of the fold line. So you're going to fold your fabric down at 3/8 of an inch, and you're going to press it. Once you have pressed this under, go ahead and put your pants right side up facing you. Before installing your zipper, make sure that it zips up and down all the way. And I like to leave mine unzipped. That way I'm just working with one side. And I'm going to place the zipper underneath this folded edge. And I'm going to make sure that the top of the zipper tape lines up to the top of my pants. All right, using a zipper foot, go ahead and top stitch this edge as close to your zipper teeth as possible. using a zipper foot. And I'm also going to change the placement of my needle to get it as close as possible to the edge. Okay, now we're going to move on to pattern piece number 12. That is our left fly. So you have notches here, and then you've got this groove right here, or I guess you could call a curve or a scallop. So go ahead and fold this right sides together. By the way, this should be interfaced. And pin right here. We're going to sew this at 5/8 at our sewing machine and then trim it. Okay, go ahead and trim your seam allowance and then take a point turner and turn this right side out, making sure that the point is sharp and completely turned out. And then you're going to go back to your machine and you are going to baste the raw edges down. And this is what it should look like. Okay, now that we're finished with this, let's go back to the fly front. So you're going to place this on top of the fly. What I like to do is make sure that the raw edges under here are meeting up with the raw edges underneath. And making sure that this edge is flush. We're going to pin this in place. Take this to your sewing machine and stitch this down. A trick of mine is that I use the existing stitch line that's already there and I just stitch on top of it. So I've switched back to the zipper foot for this, and I've also moved my needle. That way I can cover the top stitching that I did earlier with that stitch. All right, so let's take pattern piece number 13. Make sure that it's interfaced, serge that curved edge, and you should also have a dot right there. So on the right front opening, we're gonna match our notches here with the notches on the opening. Pin that in place. And you're going to sew this at a 5/8 seam allowance. Okay, so we're actually going to trim this seam allowance down. And then you're going to take this to your iron and you're going to press the seam allowance towards this pattern piece here, and we're going to come back and top stitch. Turn your right fly front facing under and put a pin at the top, and you're going to do a basting stitch on that edge. All right, so now we have to attach the tape to the right side of the zipper fly. So you want your zipper fly to overlap just a little bit. What I like to do is see it from the front and then put a pin in it, kind of like backwards almost. But it allows me to know where that zipper tape needs to be when I turn it around. Yep. So making sure that this part is out of the way and this part is not attached to the actual pant leg, I'm going to add in more pins, and I actually am going to pin this out of the way because we don't need that right now. Okay. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to move this out of the way. So again, you want to make sure that this flap, nothing is pinned from the flap to the pants, because you want to be able to stitch this down right on the flap and not catch any of the pant leg at your machine. And now that I've installed the zipper, I'm gonna go ahead and baste the top right here. All right, so the zipper works. It's installed properly. So now we are going to take the pattern piece, the paper pattern piece, and we're going to do our stitching line here. So I just always like to take this pattern piece and fold it at like 5/8 or 1/2 inch. And then we're going to take our marking tool and we are going to mark and trace around the pattern piece. Okay, and then take it to your sewing machine and we're going to do a stitching line right on top of the tracing. Okay, and you can add pins here if you want to have like support in keeping the flap in place. Okay. Okay, then you can also do a little hand stitching here to close this off. And then you should be all finished with your fly front zipper. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our pleats. So I made notches when I cut my pattern earlier for the pleat marks, but I'll just put little dots here so that you guys can see as well. So with the pleats are actually going to go in the direction towards the side pocket here. And you'll have 2 of them on both sides of the front pant legs. Okay, so now we're gonna go to our machine and we're just gonna do a basting stitch across the top. I like to do this around 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we're gonna work on our back pant leg. So on the right side up, you are going to make markings for your welt pocket, okay? And then on the wrong side, you are gonna make markings for your darts. So go ahead and we are going to do our dart first. Okay, so make sure you pin along the line here and that it matches up to the other dart leg. So we're going to take this to our machine and we're going to sew it down, and then we're going to move on to our faux welt pocket. So once you do that, you're going to press the dart towards the inseam. So your dart should be facing the curve here. And so now we are going to move on to our faux welt pocket, which is easier than doing a regular welt pocket. So I have my pattern piece here. This is pattern piece number 15, and this is the welt. On the interface side, you should have 3 dots here and 3 dots here. You are going to fold this in half, sew this at 5/8 at your machine. All right, now we're going to trim the seam allowance down. Okay, and then you're going going to turn this right side out. Make sure you poke out the corners real good. Okay, and then press this at your iron and then come back to your machine.
After you've pressed this at the iron, go ahead and do a basting stitch along the raw edge.
Okay, so we just basted our welt, and we're actually going to match the stitch line up with the dots right here. Okay, and then we are going to stitch this down at our machine. Okay, so make sure to just fold the rest of your pant out of the way. And we're actually going to trim this down just a little bit, y'all, just to get rid of that bulk. Okay, and then we're going to take this to our iron and we're going to press it up towards the other dots. It helps to have a pressing ham here. And just press it down first and then press it up. Now, if you want to hand sew this, that's fine, but you can hand sew it on the sides here. I'm gonna actually do a little bit of like an edge stitch, which is a diversion from the pattern instructions, but in my experience, because I feel like with, you know, sitting, standing, wear and tear, I would rather have that be a little bit more reinforced on the sides for me personally. If you are an excellent hand stitcher, then by all means go ahead and hand stitch this. Okay, so now that this is complete for both sides, go ahead and grab your front. Before we move on to attaching these at the inseam, we are going to go ahead and serge the seat of the back of the pants. Okay, so go ahead and grab the front part of your pants and then grab one of your pant legs and put them right sides together. And what we are going to do is we're going to pin along the inseam here, and we're going to take this to our machine and sew it down.
Complete this step for both pant legs.
Okay, so once we do this, go ahead and serge your raw edges. And now we are going to finish the seat of the pants. So the stitch really stopped here when we were working on our fly front, and now we are just going to take our pins and finish that stitch. So take this to your sewing machine and sew it at 5/8. All right, so continuing where we stopped for our zipper fly front, I'm going to place my needle down and start sewing. All right, now we're gonna add our side pockets. And so one thing that I like to do is I like to serge my side pocket before I actually attach it to my my pant. So go ahead and just serge the curve, and you can leave this side blank. And then you have a notch here, so we're gonna pin. And then we're going to do the same thing on the back side, matching those notches. And then you're going to sew this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at your machine, and you'll do this on the front and back on both sides of the pants. Okay, once you are done stitching your pocket, go ahead and finish that entire pant leg seam, and you'll do that for all 4 pant legs. Then you are going to press the seam allowance towards the pocket bag here, and you are going to top stitch this down right here. All right, so now you just want to bring your pants together, right sides together. And now we're going to sew up our pocket bag and the side of the pant. You should see dots here and here. So to me, that's always an indication to stop sewing. You're going to stitch from the top of your pants to the dot, and then stitch, and then stop, right? And then stitch here, and then go all the way to the bottom of your pants. And then you're going to come back and you're going to stitch around your pocket bag, and you'll do this for both sides of your pants. All right, so once you have sewn down the sides of your pants, go ahead and be sure to baste your pocket to the front, like how you see I did there. And then we're gonna work on our carriers. All right, so take pattern piece number 17, and you are going to want to fold this into quarters. So I'm gonna open it up so you guys can see. It's just basically folding it inside and then folding it one more time. And then you're gonna take this to the sewing machine and you're gonna top stitch this with 2 rows. One on the folded edge and then one on this edge here. So now we're gonna cut this into 5 pieces at 3.5 pieces or 3.5 inches each. So what I like to do is I like to line this up on the grid here, and I like to count 1, 2, 3.5. 1, 2, 3.5. And now we're gonna cut it right where I marked it. Okay, and I have my 5 pieces. Okay, so you should have dots here, and then one of the carriers is gonna go right here, and then there's 2 sets of the carriers will go right here on the pleats. So I'm gonna use my Wonder Clips, and we're gonna pin where these carriers will go, right on top of the dots. And we're gonna put one right on top of the center seam here. All right, so now you're gonna take this to your sewing machine and you're gonna baste each carrier down. Okay, so once you're done basting all 5 carriers down, put your pants to the side and we're gonna work on our waistband. Okay, so now you're gonna take your waistband, which should be interfaced, and you are going to do a 5/8 stitch on the unnotched side, and then you are going to press it under, okay? On the notch side, you are going to match up your notches and your edges to this this pattern here. So make sure you're leaving a little bit of seam allowance on the fly fronts here, at least 5/8. That way you'll be able to enclose the fly front, and make sure you've matched all your notches and whatnot and pinned everything in place. And we're going to take this to our machine and we're going to sew it down. Typically when I sew down any sort of waistband or collar, I will start at the center back and sew in this direction and then come back to the center back and then sew in this direction. And you are free to do that along with me. All right, so once you're done stitching down your waistband, go ahead and press the seam allowance towards the waistband, and then you're gonna press your waistband in half, and you're gonna let the folded edge here meet the folded edge on the other side. And you are going to put a pin or a clip right here, and you're gonna stitch right here at 5/8 to close this up. And you're gonna do the same thing on this side as well. And I'm gonna clip the seam allowance as well. And then do the same thing on this side. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn this right side out like this. And you see we have like pretty much a perfect corner right here on the edge. And once you flip everything back over to this side, press it down, and you can either slip stitch this closed or stitch in the ditch, but either way you will be top stitching all of this as well. So it's up to you how you would like to finish it. Okay, so once you hand stitch it down, go ahead and do a top stitch across the bottom edge of your waistband. So because you are stitching through all thicknesses, I will still keep a wider stitch length for this part as you do the top stitching across the top. All right, so once we're done top stitching the waistband at the lower edge, we're going to take some wonder clips or some pins and pin our carriers. And the way that you're going to do that is by folding the top of this down by about a 1/2 inch, and then taking your wonder clip or your pin and pinning it across. So go ahead and do that for all 5 carriers, and then you're going to baste the top edges of each carrier. Okay, so I'm still keeping that wider stitch length, and I'm going to remove the clip and lower my presser foot. Okay, so you want to do that for each carrier, back stitching back and forth, and your top stitching will actually cover this stitch over when you finally do it. So don't worry if you go a little bit past the carrier. Like, don't go insane, but it's okay if you go a little past. Okay, so now that we're finished with basting down our carriers, you're going to finish your top stitching coming down, continuing right down here, going right to this corner, and then going across. And we're going to do that all the way around the waistband. Okay, so I redrew my buttonhole because it had faded with ironing and pressing and all that stuff. And so the button here is 7/8. And so obviously you want to put your buttonhole here and then your button here. Now I would encourage you to put a nice button here just because you don't have to wear the cummerbund with the pants. In fact, you can wear them totally separate from the cummerbund. And so if you want to put like a really nice button here or something like that, definitely do that. I know I plan to. I just really like this button. Anyway, all right, you guys, so go ahead and make your buttonhole according to your machine standard or according to your machine directions, and then go ahead and also do your hem. And so you can serge the edge and then you can turn it under, and you can also cut off any excess fabric as needed for my short girlies. All right, once you are finished with your buttonhole and your hem, let's move on to view C. Okay, so now we're going to move on to view C, and I recommend that you get this cummerbund buckle set by Dritz. I'll link this down below for you guys, but it's going to be essential to have to complete the cummerbund belt. So you're going to grab pattern piece number 19, and there's little like zigzag cuts on the sides of pattern piece number 19, and those are for your pleats. So when you cut this out, and I'll just grab the pattern piece here, my recommendation is to make slits here, here, make like little notches here, 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 basically where the full line is and where the dotted line is, and do that on both sides, and it'll make this step much easier. So make sure your single notches are facing the top and that your double notches are on the bottom, and you're going to take your pleat, you're going to take your notch and match your pleat up just like this. And then one of these is just a basic notch, but the other one is an actual pleat notch here. So now what you're going to do is you are going to baste the sides down at your machine. Okay, so go ahead and take pattern piece number 20, and this should be interfaced. And on the short sides where you have single notches, press this in at 5/8, and then you're going to trim it. And then matching up the double notches on the bottom, you are going to stitch this down here. All right, sew this at 5/8 at your machine. So go ahead and press the seam allowance to this side, and then you are going to understitch All right, so you've already understitched it. So now we are going to basically make a band or a loop and match up your notches at the top, just like how we did on the bottom, and sew this at 5/8. Okay, so grab pattern piece 22, and you should have transferred the 3 dot marks onto your pattern pieces, and these should also be interfaced as well. You are going to fold this down in half, right sides together. And you're going to stitch along the line here at 5/8.
Once you finish stitching this down, go ahead and take your band that you worked on earlier, turn it right side out, and press the pleats.
Okay, so go ahead and take pattern piece number 22 and trim the ends off. Be sure not to cut through that seam allowance. And then grab a loop turner if you have one. All right, then you may have to poke out those corners. And I just like to use a seam ripper to kind of get those corners out, those stubborn corners like this. And also be sure to baste the raw edges. Okay.
To make the right back strap, fold 5/8 of the finished edge of the strap over the center bar of slider, and then put a pin in it to secure it and stitch it in place. Take the free end and put it through the prong section of the interlocking buckle and weave it through the outer bars of the slider. This is intended to be the adjustable part, so no further stitching is required on this side. To make the left back strap, wrap 2 3/4 of an inch around the outer bar and then pin it at a 1/2 inch and take it to your sewing machine and stitch that down. Now you should be able to put your buckles together, and this is how it should look. So let's set these to the side and work on pattern pieces 21. Take pattern piece 21 and stitch it along the longer sides of the pattern piece. Do this for both sides, and this is what both pieces should look like. Insert your completed strap pieces into both pattern pieces 21, just like I'm doing here. Make sure that the raw edges of the straps are matching up to the raw edges of pattern pieces 21. Stitch down the short sides at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance at your sewing machine. Turn those pieces right side out and give it a really good press. On the pleated side up, go ahead and place the buckles matching those notches from earlier and pin them to the cummerbund, and we're going to sew this at our machine. Moving pattern piece number 20 out of the way, go ahead and stitch down the straps to the pleated side. Okay, then go ahead and put the seam allowance in here, and you can either slip stitch this or stitch this in the ditch on both sides of your cummerbund, and you're all set. All right, you guys, I can't wait to see what you all come up with. Be sure to tag me in your makes. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.